Hi, I'm Delesna Dawatko here with your daily English news. The University of Mekelle has discovered that about 60 children have died at the Ida Referral Hospital due to famine-like conditions within the past 2 months. Fighting has resumed in Ethiopia's Afar region after a month-long lull. 4 of the Tigrayan peacekeepers serving as such to the African Union mission in Somalia have been killed. A high-level ministerial of G7 nations and other major donor countries agreed to strive for the lifting of restrictions on humanitarian access to the civilians of Tigray. The University of Mekelle has disclosed about 60 children have died at the Ida Referral Hospital due to famine over the last 2 months. The university said in an information is shared on its social media platforms that the number of children dying at the hospital due to famine is increasing by the day. The university expressed sadness over the death of children in this century as a result of famine caused by Abiy Ahmed's scorched earth policy. About 60 children who were admitted to the hospital for malnutrition have died over the last 2 months, and each child dies every day within that count. That figure could be higher than the number recorded by the health institutions, as children can be dying in their homes without access to any health services. Western officials confirmed that Tigrayan reports of government assault on several fronts. Aid workers said it will intensify a dire humanitarian crisis as is. Timnit Bayru has more.
According to Western officials and Tigrayan leaders, Ethiopian forces began a sweeping offensive in a bid to reverse recent gains by Tigrayan forces. Senior Western officials broadly confirmed Tigrayan accounts that the assault, which had been anticipated for weeks, started in the Amhara region, which borders Tigray to the south. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who was sworn in for a second term last week, has declined to comment in recent days. His spokeswoman did not respond to a request for comment on Tuesday. Speaking by phone, Lieutenant General Tzarkan ገብረትንሳኤ, a member of the Central Command of the Tigray forces, said Ethiopian forces had begun the military operation on Friday with a bombardment of Tigrayan positions using weapons, artillery, and drones. On Monday, the Ethiopians switched to a ground offensive led by thousands of fighters to be met by a Tigrayan counteroffensive, he said. The enemy has been preparing for months, and so have we, said General Tzarkan, who previously commanded Ethiopia's armed forces for a decade. He predicted the coming battle would be a decisive moment for the country. The ramifications will be military, political, and diplomatic, he said. I don't think this will be a protracted fight, a matter of days, most probably weeks. UN officials say the escalating conflict in northern Ethiopia will deepen the humanitarian crisis in a region that is plunging into the world's worst famine in a decade. With the Ethiopian government blocking aid shipments, some starving Tigrayans are eating leaves to survive. For Abiy, winner of the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize, the offensive is an effort to wrest control of a brutal 11-month war that has ruined his reputation as a peacekeeper and slipped beyond his grip as the fighting spread to new areas in recent months. Abiy has appeared increasingly isolated from the international support as the United Nations threatens him with the prospect of sanctions, and he clashes with UN leadership. Likening the situation to the devastating Somalia famine of 2011, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said he warned Abiy that Ethiopian restrictions on the delivery of aid had created a humanitarian crisis that was spiraling out of control. Over 5 million Tigrayans urgently need relief aid, and at least 400,000 are in famine-like conditions, the UN says. But barely 1/10 of the required aid has reached them because Ethiopia has blocked the routes into the region, officials said. The Biden administration has tried to force Abiy and the Tigrayans into peace talks by threatening sanctions against officials and entitles who block humanitarian aid and refuse to stop fighting. With his latest attack, however, Abiy Ahmed seems to be gambling that he can prevail using force, and American sanctions may worsen his plummeting economy characterized by soaring food prices and foreign currency shortages. Western officials said the Ethiopian leader had been preparing the offensive for months. He amassed new weapons from foreign suppliers and recruited tens and thousands of young Ethiopians to help fight the Tigrayan forces, as he described as cancer and weeds. One Western official said Abiy Ahmed acquired new drones built in Iran, Turkey, and China, although it is unclear who supplied them to Ethiopia. Websites that track international air traffic that have recorded dozens of cargo flights from the United Arab Emirates and a handful from Iran into Ethiopian Air Force bases in the past 6 weeks. A more consequential question is now whether Eritrea will rally against Abiy Ahmed or for Abiy Ahmed. Eritrean troops offered crucial support in the first phase of the war until June and faced many of the worst accusations of atrocities against civilians. The Eritreans are currently occupying Humara, a town in western Tigray, and some have deployed to Amhara, two Western officials said. The Tigrayan forces scored a series of surprise victories that forced Ethiopian forces out of Tigray. In July, the Tigrayan pushed into Amhara region, where the fighting has been centered ever since. The Tigrayans said Amhara forces are also participating in the latest offensives, along with regular Ethiopian troops and young men from across Ethiopia, drawn by Abiy Ahmed's appeal for recruits during the summer. But General Tzadkan, member of the Central Command, said he considered the autocratic leader of Ertra, Isaias Afwerki, who is an old foe of the Tigrayans, as his greatest threat. Isaias and his army are the major spoiler in the region, he said. If the international community is earnestly looking for a peaceful solution, a settlement will not happen without taking care of Isaias. The criticism of Abiy Ahmed in the West is growing increasingly stringent. Last week, an essay by Mark Lowcock, a former British diplomat and until recently the UN's humanitarian chief, accused Abiy Ahmed of trying to starve the people of Tigray, either into subjugation or out of existence, and warned he risked causing his country into collapse. Abiy's game plan will not work, Lowcock wrote, citing what he said was a growing expert consensus. If he tries and fails to destroy Tigray, he will destroy himself. If he succeeds, he will never survive, and the backlash that will follow.
Fighting has resumed in northern Ethiopia's Afar region after a month-long lull, humanitarian and Tigray sources told AFP on Wednesday. The government appeared to be pressing a new offensive. There were reports of an armed clash on Tuesday in the town of Aura in Afar's Fenti zone. Member of Central Command of the Tigray Armed Forces, Getachew Reda, confirmed there had been fresh hostilities in the Afar region, saying enemy's forces are crumbling in the disarray in parts of Afar, describing fighting along the border between Afar and the Amhara regions. He, however, denied claims that Tigray forces had used heavy weapons against civilians. We do not target civilians, and the alleged artillery attack is yet another fictitious accusation to tarnish our forces' reputation. For nearly a week, humanitarian and Tigray sources have been reporting signs of a government offensive that could potentially mark a new phase of the 11-month-long war in the northern of Ethiopia. Officials have not explicitly confirmed the offensive is underway, though the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's office said the weak government had a responsibility to protect the citizens in all parts of the country from any acts of terrorism. Getachew said on Wednesday that TPLF's current military objective is to push back the offensive and go as far as it takes to break the siege on the people of Tigray. A high-level minister of G7 nations and other major donor countries agreed to strive for the level of lifting restrictions on humanitarian access to civilians in Tigray and the negotiation of a ceasefire among all parties. The urgent meeting convened by the Ambassador U.S. Special Envoy of the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, and the USAID Chief Samantha Power yesterday discussed the humanitarian response to the northern Ethiopia. Donors agreed that innocent Ethiopian lives depend upon the government of Ethiopia's immediately re-establishing communications, banking, and other vital services within Tigray's region and fully restoring transport corridors and air linkage to Tigray. This includes allowing desperately needed fuel, medicine, medical supplies into the region, all of which have been in effect blocked by the government for the last 2 months. Without immediate changes in this regard, humanitarian organizations are being forced to scale back or halt their programs, and hospitals, health centers, and have ran out of medical supplies as well. The United States and its partners discussed the possibility of augmenting roads and operations which are failing to meet urgent humanitarian needs due to the government's obstruction by expanding their operation to deliver relief supplies directly to the region. Participants of the meeting included senior representatives from Canada, Denmark, the European Union, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, as well as the United States. The participants achieving the most urgently needed objectives, the lifting of the restrictions on the humanitarian access to civilians in Tigray, and the negotiations of ceasefire among all parties will require coordinated action. Donors reinforced their support for the efforts of the African Union and representatives for the Horn of Africa, who met yesterday with Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Participants also discussed the importance of the upcoming meeting of the European Union's Foreign Affairs Council on the 18th of October to better align EU's member states around actions necessary to shift the parties to this conflict toward a negotiated political agreement. More than 11 months of fighting have left an estimated 6 to 7 million people facing severe food insecurities. More than 2 million people have fled their homes, and up to 900,000 people are facing famine-like conditions in Tigray, where people are going to multiply days without food and have resorted to eating leaves just to stay alive. Finally, the participants discussed the importance of accountability for the victims of the conflict and the potential of the forthcoming joint report of the Office of the United Nations, High of Commissioner for Human Rights and Ethiopian Human Rights Commission to provide recommendations for how to end impunity for this most responsible of atrocities, including widespread sexual violence and extrajudicial killings. In a related development, the U.S. announced yesterday it was providing more than $26 million in addition to humanitarian assistance to help people affected by the ongoing conflict in the northern region of Ethiopia. The U.S. is the largest donor of the humanitarian assistance in Ethiopia, providing more than $1 billion throughout the country over the last year, including more than $663 million in humanitarian assistance since the crisis has begun. 4 of the Tigrayan peacekeepers serving as peacekeepers in African Union mission in Somalia have been killed. In a phone interview with TMH, the Tigrayan peacemakers said they have been exposed to severe injustices and called the international community to come to their rescue immediately. The peacekeepers are around 300 in number and asked the international community to facilitate their asylum and protect them from being forced to return to Ethiopia. I am currently in the UN-approved Amazon mission in Somalia. It has been 3 years since we were deployed and severe in the mission since the start of the war on Tigray. They have been repatriating our colleagues or Tigrayans' origin in small numbers, like in about 13 or 14 at a time, ferrying them by helicopters to Jijiga and Harar. So far, they have taken over 100 Tigrayan peacekeepers, and those of us remaining here in Somalia are about 300 in total. We are going through a lot of injustices like beatings. 5, 6 soldiers beat 1 Tigrayan, and worse, they have started killing. So far, 4 peacekeepers, 1 was recently killed, and previously 3 officers in leadership positions were gunned down by the Amhara soldiers with impunity. Now they are trying to throw us into prison, and en masse, we are not allowed to listen to Tigrayan music, nor talk to people in Tigrayan language. They disarmed us of our weapons, even our uniforms. They have told us we will be repatriated to Ethiopia, to a place called Garbessa, 37 kilometers from Jijiga. This is no office here. No one has talked to us about our situation. We know it's very easy for every peacekeeper's right to request asylum, but no one is facilitating this for us. They've been killing and torturing us, and now they want to forcefully take us back to Ethiopia. We plead that our voices are heard, and no Tigrayan peacekeeper wants to go back. What they do is they take you out and at gunpoint and kill you. In a related news, a plot is underway by the Ethiopian military to implicate Tigrayan peacekeepers serving at the United Nations Interim Security Force in Abiy of planning an attack similar to the one inflicted on the Northern Command last year. This allegation was broadcasted on pro-Abiy Isa television, recently aimed at framing the Tigrayan peacekeepers and taking a sinister measure against them by way of revenge for Abiy's defeat on the war front. Communal violence broke out in East Welaga on Sunday. Addis Standard says it received reports from members of both the Amhara and the Oromo community in Karamu Warada in the East Welaga zone. The testimonies received from members of both communities and the community leader reveal that violence broke out on the 10th of October, claiming the lives of many and forcing people to flee their homes. Sources disclosed to Addis Standard that the violence started at noon and went well into the day. One eyewitness from the Oromo community alleges that Amhara militia launched the hours-long onslaught on civilians. He told Addis Standard that 3 of his family members, his father, his mother, and his 12-year-old brother, were killed in their house. He accused the Amhara militia of crossing over into the Oromia region and inciting violence by rallying up the Amhara community in the town, and he added the attacks were premeditated as well as organized. He said, "It is an intentional attack against Oromo civilians," adding, We can't even lay the dead to rest, unfortunately." According to him, more than 25 ethnic Oromos were killed in the attack. He narrated, "They forced many out of a town, killed them, and they're also torturing those that didn't kill." He narrated the events, saying they came in large numbers, armed with heavy artillery. They killed randomly, looted what they could, and burned what they couldn't carry. Another resident of the Warada and the ethnic Amhara testified the attacks didn't target the ethnic Oromo alone. It is rather conflict between the Oromo and the Amhara residents. He recounted the event from where he was hiding. "We hid the children, women, and those of who were armed and fled to the woods." An elderly and community leader of the Amhara origin detailed how the attack unfolded. He recalled the withdrawal of the Oromia Special Forces from the area on Wednesday, 4 days before the attack had begun, saying, "We asked the authorities to stop the withdrawal of the Special Forces from the area, but they did." Shooting ensued shortly after, claiming the lives of many civilians, majority of whom were Oromo. He added 8 ethnic Amhara were also killed in this battle. The recurring violence in East Welaga Zone continues to claim lives of many civilians. The security situations in Kiramu Warada and East Welaga Zone of Oromia Regional State has been deteriorating following the September 17th and 18th attack that killed 18 people in Boka Kabele. Addis Standard reached out to the administrator of Kiramu Warada, Desta Tiki, for comments, which he replied by saying he cannot comment unless he receives a direction from the government to give comments to specific media organizations. Ararsa Mardasa, the commissioner of Oromia Police on his part, refused to comment unless he's connected in person. And moreover, multiple attempts to reach the administrator of the East Welaga Zone, Alamayo Tesfa, as well head of Peace and Security Bureau of the zone, were to no avail either. President Joe Biden is set to host Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta on Thursday as war and the humanitarian crisis roil neighboring Ethiopia. According to the White House, the meeting is going to be in Biden's first one-on-one in-person talks as the president with the African leader. The Oval Office talks come just weeks after Biden signed an executive order threatening to levy sanctions against Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and other leaders involved in this conflict, gripping the Tigray region if steps aren't taken soon to wind down the 11-month war. But the situation appears to have only worsened on the ground, with Tigray forces saying Ethiopia's government has launched a long-threatened major military offense against them in an attempt to end the war. A statement from the Tigray External Affairs Office earlier this week alleged that hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians, regular and irregular fighters, launched a coordinated assault on several fronts. Kenya, which shares a border with Ethiopia, has long had a strong relationship with the U.S., partnering with Washington in efforts to thwart Islamic terrorism. Kenya currently holds the presidency of the UN Security Council, a post that rotates monthly, one reason why Kenyatta is in the United States currently. Kenya also has been relatively vocal among the African nations on the war in Ethiopia. Speaking to reports at the UN on Tuesday, Kenyatta said, "The two sides need to come to a political resolution because we do not believe that there is any military resolution at hand." The Biden administration is conducting an interagency review as it considers that targets that might be hit by sanctions. This review is in part to make certain all agencies are fully on board with proposed targets, according to a senior administration official who spoke on the conditions of anonymity to discuss the internal deliberations. The Biden administration has said it would move forward with sanctions quickly if there is not a dramatic shift on ground immediately. The United Nations has warned that hundreds of thousands are living in humane-made, famine-like conditions as the conflict festers. The U.S. and the United Nations says Ethiopia troops have prevented passage of trucks carrying food and other aid. Sources, scores of people have starved to death, and this is reported by the Associated Press. About 400,000 people are living in famine-like conditions. That concludes our English segment for the day. Thank you for tuning in.